All right, good morning. Today is March 4th, 2025. I am Judge Case Johnson. This is the preliminary hearing for, can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Clarence Mangrum, charged in warrant number 2025 WA 01515, obstruction, and 2025 WA 01516, battery. In 2025, okay, somebody need to mute themselves. All right. 2025 WA 01517, public drunks. Representing the state is ASG Hagler. Representing the defendants, Attorney Mark Lane. Your witness, ASG.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would like to call Officer Ribeiro. If you could please raise your right hand. Swear or affirm that the testimony that you're going to provide in this preliminary hearing will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You can please lower your hand. Please state your first and last name for the record.
Alex Ribeiro.
And can you please spell your first and last name for the record?
Yes, ma'am. ALEXREBEIRO.
And how are you employed?
I'm a police officer with the city of Lake City, Georgia.
And for how long?
I've been with them since July of last year.
And were you employed with the Lake City Police Department on February the 3rd of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And are you post-certified and credentialed?
Yes, ma'am.
And are all of your credentials up to date?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you post-certified and credentialed on February the 3rd of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have arrest powers?
I do.
And did you have arrest powers on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you on official duty and working in your official capacity on that day as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And were you dispatched to 5619 North Lake Drive, Lake City, Georgia?
Yes, ma'am.
And what county is that address located in?
That's located inside the county of Clayton County here in Georgia.
Okay. Let the record reflect that venue has been established. And what was the nature of that call?
Yes, ma'am. I got dispatched to a report of a disturbance and a drunk person that was, they stated spazzing out at that location on North Lake Drive.
Okay. Upon your arrival, did you observe anything?
Yes, ma'am. Upon my arrival, I observed the defendant in between two properties near the address, standing in the field with a alcoholic beverage in his hand, and that was prior to my making contact with him.
Okay. Do you recall the actual name of the beverage?
Not off top of my head, ma'am. I do remember him telling him to put the bottle down, and upon my arrival, I actually made contact with the complainant, who was the defendant's cousin, who he had been staying with, who stated that his cousin was drunk out of his mind and wanted to kill himself.
Okay. And what did you do next after speaking with the defendant's cousin? What did you do next as part of your investigation?
Yes, ma'am. Based off of the statements that we received from the defendant's cousin and the fact that I was dispatched to kind of a dangerous situation and I was by myself, I decided to go ahead and detain the subject. I asked him to come over towards me, and he went ahead and threw the bottle on the ground. He kind of had a bladed stance when he was coming up on me, so I decided to put the defendant in restraints, and I told him to place his hands behind his back so I could check him. At that point, the defendant tensed up his muscles, flexed away from me, and said that I didn't have to put his hands behind his back to check him for weapons. I forced the defendant's arms behind his back and placed him in restraints. As I was putting him in handcuffs, the defendant grabbed my fingers and squeezed them tightly so I couldn't affect the arrest. whatever else he wanted to do. At that point, I checked the defendant for weapons, and I could smell a strong odor of alcoholic beverage emitting from his person, along with slurred speech. I could see the defendant had bloodshot, watery eyes, and based off of his actions, I went ahead to try to take him back towards the patrol car to detain him away from his cousin. While I was attempting to do so, the defendant again tried to Ted stop, wasn't cooperating, wasn't walking back to the patrol car after several orders.
Okay. And so during your investigation, you said that the defendant, was he given verbal commands by you?
Yes, ma'am. I said, yeah, I ordered him to come along with me, not to tense up, and he continued to do so. And then I had to tell him to stop trying to pull away from me while I was trying to escort him back to the vehicle. I ended up having to do kind of an escort maneuver, sliding my arm up over his back, grabbing his shoulder, and dragging him back towards the patrol car.
Okay. And how did you conclude your investigation?
After speaking with the defendant's cousin, and after speaking with trying to speak with the individual on scene, based on the fact that he grabbed my fingers when I was trying to detain him, he actively resisted me putting him in restraints. And the strong odor of alcoholic beverage emitting from his person, along with the statements that he made, he was continually cussing at us, calling us names, and just showing to all these symptoms, signs and symptoms of intoxication. I went ahead and apprehended the individual, placed him under arrest for obstruction, battery on a law enforcement officer, and public drunk, and transported him to county jail. Once we arrived at the jail, he also refused to obey the instructions of jail staff.
Okay, and why was he charged with obstruction of a law enforcement officer?
Charged for obstruction of a law enforcement officer because while he was in the back of the patrol car while we were checking on him, at one point I was trying to shut the door and he kept putting his foot in the door, so I couldn't get the door shut. The whole time he was just interfering with our duties to try to clear the scene.
Okay, and then why was he charged with battery on a law enforcement officer?
When I was attempting to detain him, he went ahead and grabbed my hand and was squeezing it hard. So that was the case of the battery. I didn't want him to touch me, and he was grabbing me anyways.
Okay, and the address that you were dispatched to, was this a commercial or residential location?
This was a residential location.
Okay.
And it was his cousin's address. I guess the defendant had spent the night with his cousin, and was reportedly by his cousin was drinking all morning, and that's why he ended up calling us to assist him getting him out of the house and getting him some help. Okay,
and why was the defendant charged with public drunkenness?
The public drunkenness charge came into effect because he was no longer inside the residence. He was actually standing in the middle of two properties. It's a very kind of large public area. He was in a public easement in between the two properties where a power line was going through when I made contact with him, and he was clearly intoxicated. And based off, like I said, the physical attributes of the strong odor of alcoholic beverage emitting from his breath, the bloodshot, watery eyes, he refused to take a preliminary alcohol sensor test. But based off the slurred speech and the statements he was making, cussing us out, calling us all different types of names, it was evident that he was currently intoxicated, along with the witness statement that he'd been drinking all morning and the bottle in his hand when I arrived on scene.
Okay. The person that you arrested, do you see him on virtual Zoom this morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you identify what he is wearing in his appearance? Mm-hmm.
It is the person that's being videoed from the Clayton County Jail. He's wearing a red polo shirt and a bald head.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect that Officer Ribeiro has identified the defendant for this case, Your Honor.
So noted.
Thank you. No further questions for Officer Ribeiro at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Lane.
Hey, good morning, officer.
Good morning, Attorney Lane. How are you, sir?
Hey, pretty good. So when you approached Mr. Mangrum, you said that he was out in a public space. He was in between two different lots.
Yes, sir. It's kind of hard to explain without showing y'all the video, but yes, there was two property lots, and there was a public easement in the middle of it due to a large field where the power lines went in between the two properties.
Okay, so you never saw him on the porch?
No, sir. No, I made contact with him in the middle of the two properties.
Okay. And did he tell you, looking here in your report, the reason why he was upset is he had recently found out that his mother had died?
My understanding,
Objection irrelevant, Your Honor.
Your Honor, it's in his report.
But how is that relevant to the charges?
We're just talking about his emotional state and whether he was drunk or not.
I'm gonna object to the excuse me, I'm gonna overrule the objection. Go ahead, continue on, Attorney Lane.
Thank you, Judge.
Officer,
yes.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
The defendant stated that he had just lost his mother. However, the cousin advised that he had lost his mother 2 years ago. It was very confusing due to the high level of apparent intoxication from the defendant to get a clear story from him.
Okay. Did he tell you though that even though she may have passed away 2 years ago, he had just recently found out?
At this point, sir, I wasn't able to really understand a lot of what he was saying due to his state.
Okay. In his state, do you think that were you able to tell, was he having any kind of a mental health breakdown?
Based off my training experience, it really appeared that the defendant was highly intoxicated. From the fact that he had an alcoholic beverage in his hand from when I arrived, and the witness statements, and along with the personal attributes, emotion. He never made any statements to me that led me to believe that he was anything other than that highly level of intoxicated.
Okay. And did he, as far as when you ordered him to put his hands behind his back, did he tell you that he couldn't do it because he had previous injuries?
No, sir. He couldn't do it. He put his arms out and flexed, or he put his arms out like this, and he stated that I didn't have to put his hands behind his back to check for weapons.
Did you notice any injuries on his hands or anywhere on his body that would have prevented him from complying and putting his hands behind his back?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you have your body cam on when all this was occurring?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And were there any other witnesses at the location?
Not until the other officers arrived on scene, but the defendant's cousin was the reporting party, and he was also the witness to the event.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, officer. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, sir.
Any redirect?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
All right, closing arguments. ASG?
Yes, Your Honor. At the time, the state will ask the court to find that there is probable cause for obstruction of a law enforcement officer, battery on a law enforcement officer, and public drunkenness. Based on Officer Ribeiro's testimony, he testified that he was dispatched to the defendant's cousin's residential location, and the specific facts of that dispatch was that there was a drunk person spazzing out. The officer testified that the defendant was not in the home upon his arrival. He was outside the home in the public. He was located between two public easements. Additionally, Officer Ribeiro testified that as he was attempting to arrest the defendant, at that time, the defendant squeezed his fingers, trying to prevent him from securing the arrest. And then Officer Ribeiro also testified that he gave the defendant verbal commands to put his hands behind his back, in which he refused. He also testified that when he was trying to close the door, as he was putting the defendant in the vehicle, the defendant also was keeping the officer from closing the door by putting his foot out. And so based on the facts that was provided by Officer Ribeiro, the testimony provided by him, we just asked that the court find that there is probable cause for obstruction of law enforcement officer. The defendant refused to obey lawful commands. Battery on law enforcement officer, the defendant squeezed and grabbed the Officer Ribeiro's fingers during the time that he was trying to handcuff him, and public drunkenness. The defendant was found outside of the home, in between two public easements. There was an alcohol bottle that Officer Ribeiro observed as well. And the call that came through was that it was a drunk person spazzing out. And for those reasons, we ask that the court find that's probable cause for all three offenses. Thank you.
All right, Attorney Lane.
Your Honor, we'd request a dismissal of the battery charge. The code requires for a battery that they show substantial physical harm. And here the allegation is simply that the officer's fingers were squeezed. there wasn't any evidence put on that showing substantial physical harm. So just based on that, we'd request a dismissal of the battery charge.
All right. Based upon the evidence presented, I do find there is sufficient probable cause to combine all three cases over to the State Court of Clayton County. That's the order of the court.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And the next one, we are
Your Honor,
yes.
if we may, Your Honor, if I may interject, one of our officers, the officer that's on the Martin case, Officer Wilson, he is actually in a meeting with the airport general manager, and so he has requested we can do his case next, if the court is inclined.
Mark, and that's the only charge, that one charge, criminal trespass?
Yes, Your Honor. That's what I'm tracking.
Okay. All right, so yes, we'll Deputy, we're done with that with Mr. Mangram. Now we need Kenneth Martin.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, this Officer Ribeiro, this is my only case. May I be excused?
Yes, have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Y'all be safe. Bye now.
You too. Thank you, officer.
Thank you.
Deputy, Mr. Mangram, Clarence Mangram, he's free to go.
You ready to
We
go back,
need
y'all?
Mr. Kenneth Martin.
All right, one more, y'all. Your Honor, Mr. Mangum, did he get a court date? Court date or just went upstairs?
Say that again, Deputy?
Mr. Mangrum, did he get a new court date or he just went
No,
upstairs?
not yet. He'll get notice of his arraignment.
Your Honor, Martin hadn't made it down to the court yet. We have Mr. King here. But Martin hadn't been able to come down yet. They had something going on in the house.
Go back right now. You know what happened?
Did you hear me, Your Honor? Your Honor. Judge Johnson.
I heard you.
Okay, so maybe she might have walked off.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Martin hasn't come down yet, ma'am, but I've concluded my meeting with the GM, so I'm available whenever you have time for my case, ma'am.
Okay, so Mr. Martin has not been brought down. Is that what you said?
Yeah, he's on the way down, Your Honor, but he hadn't been released yet. They had to get somebody. They had a situation going on in the house.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, then let's do. And let's do.
Mr. Borkins refused to come to a preliminary also, Your Honor.
Well, I think we were holding on that one, correct, Judge? Because you wanted to get the file, because the state requested that it be transferred to the next felony. I think we're holding on the judge's, your
The
decision
next
for
one is
that
going to
one.
be Nettles, Andre Nettles. The only thing, we.
Your Honor, Mr. Nettles and Mr. Donald, they in
I'm
actual
sorry, say that again?
Mr. Nettles and Donalds are in that disciplinary room, so a supervisor still hadn't brought them down either.
Okay. So we just put that to the side, we've done order.
Mr. King is here now.
All right, so let's see if we're ready for anybody else.
Your Honor, I believe the deputy said that Mr. King, the defendant King is ready. Did I hear
Okay.
correctly? Okay.
And Judge, that's one with private counsel, Mr. Stanley Schoolcraft. I don't know if
Yes, we
he's-
have to, we don't, Yate, can we reach out to Mr. Schoolcraft?
I did, Your Honor. I called and sent an email with the Zoom link, so I'm waiting for a response.
You say you did call though?
Yes, and resent the Zoom link.
All right, so I guess we just on hold until we get some inmates that we can have hearings with.
Yeah, they on the way up, Your Honor. Donald and Nettles, they on the way up.
Say that again?
They should be here in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Donalds and Nettles.
Okay, all righty. We'll just be on hold and for that till you can get me somebody, all right?
Yes,
Excuse
ma'am.
me.
And Your Honor, if I may, I believe you said that you wanted to look at the facts for Donald's case. The state requests that this case be reset to the next felony preliminary hearing.
What did you say?
I believe we were holding for your final decision. I know that the state requested that this case be reset to the next felony preliminary hearing, Donald, because he has a criminal damage in the second degree, which is a felony on his face. I believe you wanted to.
Danielle?
Donald, yes, Your Honor. Donald.
All right, so Officer Steele is raising his hand. Where's Officer Steele? There you are. Officer Steele, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm Officer Johnson. Can you hear me?
No, not you, Officer Johnson. I see it says Officer Steele,
Okay.
but I guess he can't get off mute right now.
Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor, this officer still. I'm here on the Francisco case. Francisco is no longer in jail. In fact, he was in school this week sometime. So I don't know if he's still in jail, but that's the case that I'm here on.
Okay, Yate, can we make sure that this person is already bonded out? Let's see. What
I
do we?
don't have a
Is that the last
Francisco on
name,
the
Your
calendar.
Honor? Is that the last name?
It's Francisco.
Is that the
don't have
last name?
Francisco.
Yeah, his name is
Yeah,
Francisco.
we don't have a Francisco on this calendar.
Let me just double check. But his name is it's spelled RHAEK, and his last name is Francisco.
I'm not showing a Francisco on our calendar today.
Okay, I appreciate it. Well, Your Honor, am I free to go then?
Yes, you're free to go. Thank you.
All right, have a great day.
Excuse me, Your Honor. This is Officer Johnson. I was looking at the calendar and I do not see Talia Graham on there.
I don't remember that name either. Hold on, let me just, no.
No, there's no Talia Graham on the calendar today.
Your Honor, we have those detainees here now.
Great. So you have Mr. Martin? We can do Mr. Martin first.
No, I have Nettles and Donald.
Nettles and who?
Donald, Jeffrey.
Okay, we're not gonna have a hearing on him, but I do need Nettles.
Okay, so Donald can go back.
Yeah, go ahead and send him back.
Okay.
Your Honor, is that one being reset to the 31st with,
Yes. Mhm.
okay, thank you, Judge.
Your Honor, Officer Johnson stated that he was here for Graham.
Mhm.
And Graham is not on the calendar. Can Officer Johnson be dismissed?
I think usually there's.
Yes, he's free to go.
Your Honor, may Officer
thank you.
Coombs be dismissed as well? She was on the Donald case.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Mhm. Thank you, Officer Gooms.
All right, we're about to start the Nettles case. Are you Andre Nettles? Okay, all right. All righty. Now calling the matter of State of Georgia versus Andre Nettles, charged in warrant number 2025 WA 71750, battery, and 2025 WA 71751, simple battery on an officer, as well as 2025 WA 71752, terroristic threats, 2025 WA 71753, terroristic threats. Representing the state is ASG Hagler. Representing the defendant is Attorney Mark Lane. Your witness, ASG.
Thank you. At this time, the state would like to call Officer Everson. Officer Everson,
I'm here.
it's kind of dark. Able to bring some light to your camera? It's very dark on my end. Judge, can you see her, or is it dark on your end as well?
I can see her a little bit.
You can.
I can see her enough.
Okay, got you. Can you please raise your right hand? Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you've given this preliminary hearing will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. You can please lower your right hand. And please state your first and last name for the record.
Jaya Everson.
And can you please spell your first and last name for the record?
Jiyah, last name Everson.
And how are you employed?
Police officer, Clayton County Police Department.
Okay. And for how long?
Almost 2 years.
And were you employed with the Clayton County Police Department on February the 5th of 2025?
Yes.
And are you post-certified and credentialed?
I am.
Are all of your credentials up to date?
They are.
And were you post-certified and credentialed on February the 5th of 2025?
Yes.
And do you have arrest powers?
Yes.
And did you have arrest powers on that day?
Yes.
And were you on official duty and working in your official capacity on February the 5th of 2025?
Yes.
And were you dispatched to 3567 Highway 138, apartment R417, Stockbridge, Georgia on that day?
Yes.
And what county is that address located in?
Clayton County.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that venue has been established for this case.
So reflected.
Thank you. And what was the nature of that call?
We had gotten dispatched to the area for a disturbance at multiple hotels in the area, stating that a Black male was walking around assaulting women.
Okay. During your investigation and upon your arrival, did you speak with anyone?
Upon my arrival, I spoke with the first officer on scene, which was Officer Long.
Okay. And what did she inform you?
She informed me that once she got there, Mr. Nettles was very hostile. He was yelling and making threats towards the victim and his wife.
Okay. Who is the victim in this case?
Emmanuel and Gurley.
Okay. And what is his wife's name?
Gurley.
I'm sorry?
Gurley.
Okay. So the victim's name you say is Emmanuel?
Correct.
Okay. And what was his wife's name?
Her name is Gurley.
Gurley. Okay. And you said that you received information that threats were made. Specifically, what threats were made?
To rape his wife.
Who were the threats made to?
The threats were made to Emmanuel and to Gurley.
Okay. During your investigation, were you able to determine if anyone overheard these threats?
Officer Long advised me that when she was on scene, she heard the threats being made.
Okay. Okay. Doing your investigation and speaking with Officer Long, did she tell you anything else?
No.
Okay. Did you speak with anyone upon your arrival? I mean, who else did you speak to after speaking to Officer Long?
I spoke to both victims, Emmanuel and Gurley, to get their perspective of the situation.
Okay. And when you spoke to, we'll just say Mr. Emmanuel first, what did he inform you?
That he and his wife were at the location for a meeting, and while they were inside, Nettles came into the building and was saying that he needed help. And Emmanuel stated that Nettles looked like, like something was wrong with him, or that something was off, but he told him that there wasn't any public phones there and that he should leave to call 911 or go somewhere where he could use a phone. And he said that Nettles had started cursing at him and using profanity, and he pulled his wife behind him because Nettles started to get very aggressive. Then he said that Nettles charged at him and he told him not to do that. And he also let him know that he was employed as a Clayton County SO deputy, even though he was not in his uniform. He let him know who he was. And he said that Nettles would not stop antagonizing him, and Nettles seen that he had a firearm on him and he was trying to get him to use it. But he said he never pulled it out, and they exchanged words, and Nettles spit on him and told him that he would rape his wife.
Okay. After speaking to Mr. Emmanuel, did he mention the defendant did anything else besides spit on him?
No.
You said no?
Correct.
Okay. When you spoke to his wife, you said her name is Mrs. Gurley. What did she inform you?
She wasn't really able to recall much besides that he did say that he would rape her. Other than that, she was like shooken up and wasn't able to really state what had happened.
Okay. At any point, did you speak with anyone, any hotel representative?
No.
Okay. Do you recall if Ms. Long spoke with any of the hotel representatives?
I'm not sure.
Okay. After speaking to Mrs. Gurley, did you speak to anyone else?
No.
How did you conclude your investigation?
I spoke to Officer Long about it since she was the initial officer on scene.
Okay, and how did you conclude your investigation?
We did terroristic threats and simple battery.
Okay, and when you say we did you mean that you did charges for it? What do you mean you say we did?
Right, charges for simple battery and terroristic threats.
Okay, and at any point did you see the defendant when you arrived on the scene?
He was already in the back of Officer Long's patrol car when I arrived on scene.
Okay, did you actually see him in the back of the car?
I did.
Okay. The defendant that you came in contact with on that day, do you see him on virtual Zoom?
I do.
Okay, can you identify what he's wearing and describe his hair?
Orange jumpsuit, looks like dreads or twist.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect, Your Honor, that Officer Everson has identified the defendant for this case.
So reflected.
Thank you. And so why was the defendant charged with simple battery?
For spitting on Emmanuel.
And why was he charged with terroristic threats?
For threatening to rape his wife.
One second, Your Honor.
All right.
And speaking with Officer Long, did she mention whether or not the defendant made any threats to her?
She did not while on scene, no.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions for Officer Everson.
All right, Attorney Lanes.
Hey, good morning, officer.
Good morning.
When you were encountering and with Mr. Nettles, did he seem like he was lucid and able to understand your questions and commands?
I didn't have a conversation with him. Like I said, he was already detained in the back of the car when I got there. And from that point, he was just screaming and kicking the doors. He wouldn't talk to anybody. He was just yelling and kicking the doors to get out of the car.
So was it Officer Long then that spoke with him?
Correct. Officer Long was the officer on scene, and she asked for backup, and I came to assist, but he was already under arrest when I arrived.
Okay. Do you know, did you have your body cam on?
I did.
Did Officer Long have her body cam on?
I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Nettles, when you did see him though, did his physical appearance, did it look like, did he have any injuries to his head or anywhere else that could have affected his ability to understand your commands or questions?
No.
Okay. And you said the officer who was one of the alleged victims here was not in uniform?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, officer. I don't have any further questions.
All right, any redirect?
No, Your Honor, not from the state.
All right, closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. Based on the evidence presented today, the state will ask the court to find that there is probable cause for simple battery. Officer Everson did testify that during her investigation, the defendant did spit on one of the victims, Mr. Emmanuel. And she also testified that the defendant also made terroristic threats. And he made those terroristic threats not only in the presence of Mr. Emmanuel's wife, Miss Gurley, but also in the presence of Officer Long. And for those reasons, the state will ask that you find that it's probable cause for simple battery and probable cause for terroristic threats. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Lane.
Yes, your officer, Your Honor, we would request a dismissal of the battery charge that was also on the calendar. There wasn't any testimony or there's nothing in the report to support that warrant ending in 71750. And so based on that, because that's carrying a $5,000 bond as well, we'd request a dismissal of that. As far as the simple battery on an officer, the officer was not in uniform. So at best, that would be a simple battery for the allegedly spitting on him. So we'd request any reference to it being on a law enforcement officer and that being like an aggravated misdemeanor. We'd request the court just keep it as a simple battery. And the two terroristic threat charges, we'd request a dismissal of one of them. Again, there was only one victim here. He was threatening the female with what he allegedly said, not the male. And so we'd request a dismissal of that one terrorist charge against the male Emmanuel.
All right, so based upon the evidence presented, I do find there is sufficient probable cause to find all the charges over to the state court of Clayton County. That's the order of the court.
Thank you, Judge. And Your Honor, may Officer Everson be excused if she has a lot of business?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, we have Mr. King here, Mr. Martin still in route.
Who's still en route?
Martin,
Yes. Okay, all right, thank you.
Ryan, I apologize for the delay, y'all. It's been one of those mornings.
Say that again.
I apologize for the delay. It's been one of those mornings.
I understand. We all have them. Now, what about Earl Jackson?
Mr. Jackson, he went back.
Yeah, we need him. I'm sorry.
Okay, you want me to call him back up? That's no problem.
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am.
You got 1, 2, 3. Yes, please.
Your Honor, Martin is en route. He coming from the mental health dorm, so he en route.
Second out of it, second out of it.
You all weren't ready for King, right?
Yes. And Your Honor, inmate King is up whenever you're available.
All right, give me 1 minute.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is Mr. King. That's the one that Stanley Schoolcraft is representing.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I think we're probably still waiting on his attorney. Okay, yeah, I forgot about that. Because I don't see his attorney on. So we have to bring up the other person. Deputy, can you hear me? Okay, if he can you ask him to come to the screen, please?
Who do you need?
Yes, so I forgot. This person has a private attorney, so we're still waiting to hear back from his private attorney. So who else do you have up that we can do when the judge is ready to proceed?
Martin and
Yes,
Jackson.
that's correct. Attorney Schoolcraft has not responded yet, so we're still waiting on
Okay,
staff.
thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have Earl Jackson?
He's on the way back up.
Okay,
He was sent back, but he's on the way back up.
okay,
And
and
Martin
then
on the mental health dorm, so he's en route also. Officer had to escort him up.
okay, yeah. So if you can just we're gonna just hold off on King for right now until we hear back from his attorney. So we can't proceed without his attorney right now. So sorry about that.
No problem. Somebody should be able within the next couple of minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
It's Mr. Jackson.
Okay, thank you.
Please stand by. Your Honor will be in a moment.
Thank you.
Your Honor will be logging back on.
Thank you.
All righty. And so is this Mr. Earl Jack? No, who is this?
This is
King?
Jackson, Your Honor.
Jackson?
Jackson, yes, Your Honor. Mhm.
Earl Jackson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, James
Okay.
Earl Jackson. Mhm.
All righty. Now calling the matter of State of Georgia versus Earl Jackson, charged in warrant number 2025 WA 71774, battery family violence, and 2025 WA 71775, terroristic threats, 2025 WA 71776, simple assault. Representing the state is ASD Hagler. Representing the defendant is Attorney Mark Lane, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would like to call Officer Hartley. Officer Hartley, can you please turn your camera on and unmute yourself? Ready to begin the preliminary hearing.
Okay.
Okay, we can't see you. Everything is blurred. We can't see you.
It's facing the other way. I'm sorry. I don't know how to turn it back around.
There should be something that looks like a camera. If not, it may be three dots, but it should look like a camera with arrows going in a circle, and that should be the option to turn your camera around. Is it on a laptop or is it on a mobile device?
A laptop.
Okay.
It was working just a minute ago. I don't understand why it's not showing.
Okay, let me see. Pick your laptop up again, because I remember seeing it clear when you moved it.
Mm.
Okay, it's clear now. Oh,
it's clear, but it's showing like outward. It's not showing in like the.
inward. Yes.
Yeah.
Trying to think.
And it just was. I can log in through mobile. I know that. Just gonna make it a little bit difficult.
When you go to your camera, do you see video settings? It may be in your video settings.
Yeah, it's in the. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
All right. Just have to do mobile view, I guess.
Okay. Can you please raise your right hand? And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're gonna give today in this preliminary hearing will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You can please lower your right hand. Please state your first and last name for the record.
Tiffany Hartley.
And please spell your first and last name for the record.
First name Tiffanie. Last name is Hartley.
And how are you employed?
With the Clayton County Police Department.
And for how long?
I've been a police officer since April 2023.
Okay. And were you employed with the Clayton County Police Department on February the 5th of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you post-certified and credentialed?
Yes, ma'am.
And are all your credentials up to date?
Yes.
And were you post-certified and credentialed on February the 5th of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have arrest powers?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have arrest powers on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you on official duty and working in your official capacity on February the 5th of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you dispatched to 1610 Battle Creek Village Drive, Jonesboro?
Yes, ma'am.
And what county is that address located in?
Clayton County.
Okay. Let the record reflect that venue has been established, Your Honor.
So reflected.
Thank you. And what was the nature of that call?
The call came out, female call stating that her 2 adult sons were physically fighting and she could not get them to stop and she was scared.
Okay. And who was the female that called?
That is one of the victims, Yvette Palmer.
Okay. And this was the mother that called?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And upon your arrival, who did you make contact with first?
The mother.
Okay. And upon your arrival, did you observe anything?
She first I knocked on the door. She opened the door. She said, "Please help me. They won't stop." And at that time, I could hear what sounded like a very loud commotion of banging on the upper level above me inside the home.
Okay. And so when you heard this banging, what did you do next?
I immediately ran upstairs. And the bedroom that was to my right when I ran up the stairs, the defendant and his brother, the other victim, was inside the room. The defendant was on top of him. He had his left hand holding a handful of his brother's hair and his right hand swinging at him with his fist.
Okay. During this time, did you give any verbal commands during this time?
I gave several verbal commands for him to stop. He would not stop. But at that point, I had to go over and try to restrain him, holding his arms back, still telling him several times to stop.
And when you say him, who are you referring to?
I'm sorry, the defendant.
Okay. And do you see the defendant on virtual Zoom?
I did see him prior to going to mobile. I saw him on my laptop.
Okay.
He had the short hair with his jumper on.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect that Officer Hartley has identified the defendant for this hearing, Your Honor.
So noted.
Thank you. And so after you gave the verbal commands to the defendant, what happened next?
Eventually, he did let go of his brother's hair, to which his brother was able to get out from under him and run to the other bedroom. I held him until backup came to where we could have them make sure that they were separated, restrained.
Okay. During your investigation, you testified that you ran upstairs and you saw them fighting. Did you see any type of punches being thrown, things like that during your observations?
Yeah, he still swung while I was trying to hold his arms back. He still tried to swing his right fist at his brother's face, even while I had my arms on him trying to restrain him.
Okay. Did you see any of the punches land?
I can't say for sure if it actually made contact because I'm standing behind him, so I just know that his fist went towards him. But if it actually made contact, I wasn't sure. I was just trying to hold on to him.
Okay. Doing your observation, doing your investigation, were you able to determine if there was any visible injuries?
There was physical injuries. There was a busted. You could tell that the defendant had dried blood like around his mouth, where it looked like his mouth had bled, and then the blood had dried a little bit around his lips. There was also visible scratches on both the victim and the defendant.
Okay, so both of the defendant and the victim had scratches. Yes. Did you notice any other visible injuries on the victim?
On the victim, at first, I thought he had more injuries to his face because there was blood all over his face. And then we were able to determine after speaking to the victim that when the defendant had a bloody mouth from being hit, he spit his blood into the victim's face. So the blood I was seeing on the victim's face was actually just bloody spit that had been spit on him.
Okay. Okay, so for clarity purposes, you observed scratches on the victim.
Yeah, there were scratches all over his arms.
Okay. And you said that the blood was from the defendant spitting in the victim's face, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you observe any other injuries to the victim besides scratches?
Besides the scratches, he had a lot of patches where hair had been ripped out of his head. Like he had dreads and it had been ripped out. There was also obvious, his hair was throughout the whole house, just in different places. It started in the living room and then all the bedroom that they were in. And then the bedroom that it started in, which is the victim's bedroom. His hair had been ripped out by the defendant.
Okay. So you were able to see like bald spots?
Yes, ma'am.
In the victim's scalp?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what is the victim's name in this case?
Victim, the brother, his is also Jackson. Hold on. James Jackson.
Okay. Okay. And what happened next during your investigation?
I asked the victim, James Jackson, I asked him what started the fight. He stated that his brother is schizophrenic and sometimes does drugs, and that he came home, the defendant came home intoxicated. The victim was asleep. He said he was woken up by the defendant pulling his hair. He got up and asked him what was his problem. He started, I believe what the victim said, he was accused of talking to the defendant's girlfriend, and then also told the victim that he was going to kill their mom. So at that point, the victim got in between him because he didn't want him to go after his mom. He didn't know what he was going to do. After him saying that he was going to kill her, then he tried to stop him, and that's when the physical altercation took place. So he said the defendant swung at him.
So the defendant swung at him first?
Yes, ma'am. And that's when he swung back just in defense.
Okay. And regarding the statement that the defendant said he was going to kill their mother, were you able to determine throughout your investigation if anyone else heard that statement?
The mother said that she was aware that he made that statement and that she had video footage of most of the altercation. I've still not received that actual video footage to report, attach it to my report, but she stated that she was aware of that as well.
Okay. And how did you conclude? I'm sorry. Upon your arrival, you said that you did speak to the mother. Did you speak to her at any other point in time throughout your investigation?
I did. After I was made aware that the defendant made a statement that he was going to kill his mother, I spoke to her a little bit more, asking what she actually saw and if she heard that. She said yes, and that she was in fear of her life, and that's why she called, because she wasn't sure what was going to happen or how bad it was going to get.
Okay. And so, at any point, did you speak to the defendant during your investigation?
I did. He was not as cooperative. He just kept telling us to speak to the victim, referring to his brother, James Jackson.
Okay.
He also referred to his girlfriend a lot, saying that people were trying to talk to her, his brother was trying to talk to her, and then kept asking us to call her for him. So he was not as cooperative.
Okay. And excuse me, how did you conclude your investigation?
Based off of the evidence I had with the marks on the victim, James Jackson, and his statement and the mother's statement on what she saw take place that validated the victim, James Jackson's statement, I had pressed the charges for terroristic threats, for making the threat to kill his mother, as well as the simple assault for spitting the blood in his brother's face, and battery for fighting his brother and causing visible bodily harm to his brother.
Okay. And so for the battery, did both the defendant and the victim live in the same household at the time of the incident? Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions for Officer Hartley.
All right, Cross.
Hey, good morning, officer.
Good morning.
So when you were speaking with my client, Earl Jackson, he was mentioning his girlfriend
Yes.
and he wanted you to call her.
Yes.
Okay. And did you all ever call her?
I did later on after he was in custody. I told him that once I got to the precinct, I would allow him to make a phone call. She never answered the phone.
Okay. Have you all interviewed her since then?
No, because she was not on scene at the time that any of it happened. He just felt like somebody was trying to talk to his girlfriend.
And the only witness we have here is their mother, Yvette. Is that correct?
Yeah, other than both victims, that was the only witnesses.
Okay. And did she observe them when I guess the altercation started, or did she just hear something?
She did not state how she initially came or knew about them fighting. She just stated that they had fought. She knew that her son, the other victim, James Jackson, she knew that he was defending her and himself. She knew that the defendant had made threats to kill her. So she said that's because he said that. That's why my son came in and tried to stop him. She was like, so he was only defending us. And she said that she got some of the footage on her phone on recording.
Have you reviewed any of that footage?
I personally did not. It was my sergeant and another officer on scene that did review the footage.
Another officer reviewed it?
Yes, I believe it was possibly Officer Arnold, and I have both my sergeants on scene, so I can't say for sure. I know one of my sergeants had viewed it.
Okay, but you haven't reviewed it?
I did not.
Okay. And the mother, Miss Yvette Palmer, she didn't see then how the altercation started, correct?
She did not say that she saw how it started. She just knows that they were physically fighting because of the defendant making a threat to kill her.
So she can't say who threw the
She said
first
she didn't know
punch.
that. But as far as, well, no, so the physical altercation she saw when fists were being swung, but she did not see the incident where the defendant pulled the victim's hair. That's how he was initially woken up.
Okay. So she didn't see that, and she didn't see who threw the first punch.
No, she saw the physical altercation taking place.
Okay. Did she tell you who threw the first punch?
Yes, she stated that the defendant had started the fight
Okay.
and
Did
that
she?
the victim was only defending himself and her.
Okay. But she never
I'm sorry?
told you who. She was unable to tell you who threw the first punch, right?
No, she did. She said the defendant started it and started the fight because her son, the victim, James Jackson, stood in between them and wouldn't let the defendant by because he made the comment he was going to kill their mom. So Jackson stood in between them, not allowing him to get by.
Okay. But she didn't tell you who threw the first punch, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Aston answered.
She's not answering, Judge.
She did answer.
Okay, go ahead and ask one more time, Attorney Lane. Go ahead.
That you were interviewing the mother, the only witness to what allegedly occurred here. And I'm asking you, did she ever tell you that she saw who threw the first punch?
Her words are the defendant started the fight and that the victim, her son, James Jackson, defended himself back by punching back.
All right. And she also said that that Mr. Earl Jackson that he suffers from some mental health issues, correct?
She said from schizophrenia.
Okay. And how did he appear that night? Did he seem like he was lucid and able to understand your commands and questions?
He understood, but you could tell he was very agitated. So I assumed it was probably a mixture of the alcohol mixed with the mental disorder, because he also had a strong odor of alcohol emitting from his person, and his family stated that he had been drinking.
Okay. And his physical appearance, we know he was bleeding from the mouth. Were there any other injuries? I guess you said scratches on the arms. Was there anything else, given that these physical injuries to him, that could have caused him to be in shock or unable to comprehend your questions and commands?
No.
And you didn't review any of the video footage, correct?
Not that the mother took, no.
Was there any other security camera footage?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did you have your body camera on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, officer. I don't have any further questions.
All right, closing arguments.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, the state does ask the court to find that there is probable cause on all three counts: battery, family violence, terroristic threats, simple assault, family violence as well. Pursuant to Officer Hartley's testimony, she testified that based on her investigation, the defendant started the physical altercation by punching the defendant. She testified that even the mother had confirmed that the defendant had started the altercation and that the victim, James Jackson, was just stepping in self-defense and punched him back in self-defense. She testified that she did notice visible injuries. She noticed scratches on the victim's arms. She also noticed patches of bald spots on his scalp and his head because the defendant pulled out his dreads. Testified that the victim's hair was pretty much all over the house. His dreads were, and also that this is a case where it's two brothers that live in the same household, and so that is where we have the battery family violence. Officer Hartley also testified that during the altercation, the defendant spit blood in the victim's face. And so we do have the element of simple assault being met there. And she also testified that the defendant made terroristic threats that was heard by the defendant's mother, specifically that he was going to kill her. And so also, Your Honor, after looking at the statute, pursuant to OCGA 16-11-37, terroristic threats, specifically paragraph D1, it says that a person convicted of the offense of terroristic threat should be punished as a misdemeanor, provided, however, that if the threat suggested the death of the threatened individual, the person shall be guilty of a felony. And so based on the fact that the evidence presented shows that the defendant made a threat that was evidence of death towards the mother, the state will also argue that this case be bound over to Superior Court. We do believe that it does rise to level felony, given what was presented today. And then the state will also ask that the court find that there is also obstruction of law enforcement officer. As Officer Hartley testified, she gave the defendants several verbal commands to stop fighting, and she was also trying to pull him back. And then trying to pull him back, he was still trying to swing. And so based on that testimony, the state will ask that not only that the case be transferred up as a felony, given the terroristic threat of death to the mother, but that the court also add the charge of obstructing law enforcement officer as the defendant did not obey Officer Hartley's verbal commands. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so the threat that was communicated, that was placed in the report says nothing about I'm going to kill you. Did you put that in your report, Officer Hartley?
Yes, ma'am.
What, in the affidavit? I don't see it in.
It should have been
Oh,
in the
kill his
affidavit.
mother. Here it is. I'm
Don't know why I
sorry.
wouldn't.
All right. So if that's first of all, I do find that there is sufficient probable cause to bind over the charges. And I do find there's a basis for the upgrade and the additional charges. ASG, are you going to send over a proposed order on those?
Yes, Your Honor, I can do that.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Well,
Your
that's
Honor,
yes.
if the defense could just be heard as far as any kind of upgrade, I would ask that the court consider that's in the report and was testified to that my client has been diagnosed and suffers from schizophrenia and a bipolar disorder, and wasn't taking his medication, and as his mother told the officer in the report, and that the court just consider that before upgrading this to a felony. There obviously wasn't any intent, if that was allegedly said, for him to do that.
Well, Your Honor, if I may, based on Officer Hartley's testimony, she did testify that the mother was in fear for her life, and that was really the basis of why she called 911.
I am on. It seems this type of behavior is a pattern, Attorney Lane, of the defendant. If you look at his criminal history, so I'm going to bind everything over, and then we can add the additional charge of obstruction. All right.
Thank you, Judge.
If you would just put that order together.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All righty. So we haven't heard from Schoolcraft, right?
No, Your Honor, I have not.
So, and is that on King?
Yes, Your Honor.
So let's go ahead and continue King to the 31st.
Yes, Your Honor.
But wait. Why is King on here and only been charged with battery?
You want to know why the basis for the battery, Your Honor? Is that what you're asking me to
No.
say?
Battery is a misdemeanor. Wait, we are on misdemeanor, Lord Jesus.
One of those days, Your Honor, one of those days.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
I thought we were still in February, remember?
Huh? Right, exactly. Right. I'm telling you. I feel you. All right. So let's continue King to what's this? Today is the 4th. Can we put him on the
18th?
25th?
You want to move him to the 18th, Your Honor? Okay, March 18th?
Oh, okay, that's still open?
Yeah, that's our misdemeanor, yes.
Okay, all right, let's move him to March 18th.
Your Honor, this is Mr. Martin.
How long do you think it's gonna be? We got
I'm gonna be late. Y'all starting late.
All right, so who do we have next?
Did you hear me, Your Honor?
Who is this young man right
Mr.
here?
Martin.
That's why I can grab him.
Martin, Kenneth Martin, Andre.
What's your name?
Kenneth Andre Martin.
Martin, yeah, Kenneth, all right.
Hey Judge, this Officer Frederick here. I had Ryan King, but you pushed it back to the 18th. So am I free to go?
On who now?
For Ryan King?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Frederick.
You're welcome.
So Kenneth Martin, to confirm, he only has one charge, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, now calling the matter State of Georgia versus Kenneth Martin, warrant number 2025 WA01559, criminal trespass, representing the state is ASG Hagler, representing the defendant's attorney Mark Lane, your witness ASG.
Thanks, Your Honor. At this time, the state would like to call Officer Wilson. Can you please raise your right hand? Okay. And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give today in this preliminary hearing will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please lower your right hand. Please state your first and last name for the record.
It's gonna be David and the last name is Wilson. WILSON.
Thank you. And how were you employed?
The City of Atlanta Police Department.
And for how long?
24 years and 4 months.
Okay. And were you employed with the Atlanta Police Department on February the 7th of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you post-certified and credentialed?
I am.
And are all of your credentials up to date?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you post-certified and credentialed on February the 7th of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have arrest powers?
I do.
And did you have arrest powers on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you on official duty and working in your official capacity on February the 7th of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And on that day, did you make contact with Kenneth Martin?
I did.
Okay. And is he the defendant in this case?
Yes, he is.
And do you see him on virtual Zoom?
I did earlier. It is him. They just brought him up a moment ago.
Okay. And can you describe what he's wearing and how his hair?
Red shirt and low haircut.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Officer Wilson has identified the defendant for this hearing, Your Honor.
So noted.
Thank you. And where did you come in contact with the defendant?
I was walking. There's a kind of a common area between the baggage claim and the check-in area on the south baggage for Delta at the Atlanta at Hartsfield Jackson. And I was walking like facing into the airport, and the defendant was going out door S4, and we like crossed like ships in the night. And when I saw him, I thought I recognized him. I turned around and he turned around, and we kind of looked at each other, and he kind of like threw his hands up in the air and started to yell, and he walked outside and down the down the sidewalk.
Okay. And the Hartsfield Airport, what county is that located in?
Could be in Clayton County. This part of the airport's in Clayton County, ma'am.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that venue has been established.
So noted.
Thank you. And so you said the defendant walked outside and down the sidewalk. What did you do next?
I turned around, and when he started to create a disturbance, I turned around and went to see if it was who I thought it was. And he kept walking ahead of me, and he finally walked into the street. And there's like a small construction area at the end of the south terminal, and he walked into traffic and around. I walked back into the airport, and I came back. He was going to have to come out onto the west curb where we have the taxis and hotel shuttles and the groom shuttles. And so I walked to that point to intercept him. And when I got to the west curb, I saw him again, and of course he was yelling and carrying on. At that point, he proceeded to go down the north side of the airport. He changed his clothing. He took off his sweatshirt, and he stored his sweatshirt, and he continued to walk up. Officer Tillman pulled up in his patrol vehicle because I called out on radio that I had, an individual that had walked away from me and walked into traffic and ignored my commands to stop. And he picked me up. We went up to door N3 where the suspect entered the airport again. And at that point, I found him in the north baggage claim. He was just walking, back down the baggage claim area. And at that point, he was taken into custody.
Okay. And I believe you testified that you thought that you knew the defendant prior.
I had recognized him from a previous encounter back in 2024.
Okay. And what was the nature of that previous encounter in
He was
2024?
issued a criminal trespass warning by another officer back in September 11th of 2024.
Okay. Do you recall that case number for that previous?
Yes, ma'am. It's 242558017. That's the Atlanta Police case number. Again, that's 242558017.
Okay. And how did you end or conclude your investigation?
Once he was just taken into custody, we walked him back to the precinct to confirm that he had a valid criminal trespass warning, which he did. And at that point, he was subsequently arrested and transported to the Clayton County Jail.
Okay. Regarding the previous criminal trespass warning, do you recall if he actually signed it or received a copy of it?
He did.
He did sign it?
I have the copy of it right here, ma'am.
Okay. In which he signed it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall if he was also given a copy of that criminal trespass warning?
No, I do not, ma'am. It wasn't issued by me. It was issued by another officer. But I do remember, he wasn't super cooperative that day. And so it's one of those people that kind of stand out in your mind.
Okay. And was he charged with anything?
Outside of the criminal trespass, no.
Okay. And why was he charged with criminal trespass?
For violating the previous criminal trespass warning. But the airport has the City of Atlanta Ordinance 22-73, which is the 24/7 closure of the airport to the non-traveling public. Mr. Martin did not have a ticket for travel. He is not an employee, does not possess a SITA airport badge, and he was not there for any official airport business to meet anyone or go to a job interview. Obviously, it was 12:35-ish in the morning, and so you're only at the airport for a few reasons. And again, his erratic behavior is what drew my attention to him. That combined with the fact that I suspected that I recognized him from the earlier encounter. But again, he had the signed criminal trespass warning where he wasn't arrested back in September, but he was issued the criminal trespass warning that he could come back to the airport based on the limited set of circumstances. Again, if you have a ticket for travel, you're an employee and things or you're there for official airport business. But he was, I'm sure, advised of all those things when he signed the criminal trespass warning in 2024.
Okay. Thank you. Officer Wilson. No further questions for Officer Wilson, Your Honor.
All right, Attorney Lane.
Hey, good morning, officer.
Good morning, Attorney Lane. How are you, sir?
Hey, pretty good. When you were meeting with Mr. Martin, his demeanor, did he seem like he was lucid and able to understand your questions and commands at the time?
Yes, sir. And that combined with the fact that, he intentionally took off his clothing to try and change his appearance, led me to believe that he firmly understood what he was doing.
Okay. And his physical appearance, did he have any visible injuries that maybe could have affected his ability to
No, sir.
understand your
He only
questions?
looked, he just looked disheveled, like he hadn't bathed or been, cleaned himself in a while. But outside of like the physical appearance of uncleanliness, he appeared normal, lucid. And again, like I said, he knew enough or had the wherewithal enough to go ahead and try to change his appearance to elude us.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, officer. I don't have any further questions.
You're welcome, Attorney Lane. You have a good day, sir.
All right, any redirect?
Two.
Not from the state, Your Honor.
Not closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor. The state will ask the court to find that there is sufficient evidence for probable cause for criminal trespass. Pursuant to Officer Wilson's testimony, he recognized the defendant from being given a previous criminal trespass warning, specifically on September the 11th of 2024 by another Atlanta Police Department officer. And so the defendant was well aware that, he could not return back to the airport unless there was for official business, or if he was an employee at the airport. And so for those reasons, the state will ask that you find the defendant, that there is sufficient PC for probable cause for criminal trespass. Thank you.
All right, Attorney Lane.
Your Honor, the defense would just submit with the officer's testimony. This is when we'd offered a waiver of the hearing in exchange for a unsecured judicial release, but we weren't able to get that agreed on. So,
all right. So based upon the evidence presented, I do find that there is sufficient probable cause to bind the charges over to the State Court of Clayton County. That's the order of the court.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. Are you ready on anything else?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Madam Prosecutor.
I've got one.
Yeah. And may Officer Wilson be excused, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Officer Wilson. Your Honor, I believe that's it, but we were just holding for Boykin and Bridges. I think you wanted to just look further into those matters, so we're just holding on those two.
All right. So on Boykin, it's going to continue to 331, the felony calendar. Same for Bridges. And then Donnell is going to go to 331 because of the second degree on the felony calendar. Jackson was PC found. Market Jackson was transferred. It was already bound over. King was continued to March 18th. Mangram, PC found. And at Martin, we were holding on. Oh, that's the one we just did.
Yes, Your Honor. We just did that one.
PC found. And then Christopher Neal has continued to 325, the officers in training. And then Andre Nettles, PC found. Jaden Owens continued to the felony calendar March 31st. Jarvis Smith, what we do with Jarvis Smith?
I have continued to 331 for the felony calendar as well, Your Honor, given that the criminal property and the second is a felony on this space.
Okay, that's right. All right. So the March 31st felony calendar.
and Judge, if I could, if we're finished with the calendar, there was one matter that was scheduled to be on the calendar, but it was waived. But once it was waived, somehow CCI showing it got bound over into Superior Court. And we were requesting, I've got the warrant number, and I believe we've sent an email out, but trying to get some help of getting that.
Say that again.
There was Nikki Vaughn was originally, their misdemeanor preliminary hearing was supposed to be today, but we ended up waiving it. And